Hello. Hello. Hello.
Everyone's like, what's that?
Hello. Yes. Fires. Fires.
Will you please take your seat unless you temporary in and out, but glad to see you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We will start this morning with a new slate. This is our beginning of our new meeting year, and we're glad to be here, and I hope you are too. I call the meeting to order November 3rd, 2017, meeting of the Contractors State License Board. My name is Ed Lang, and I'm Enforcement Committee Chair. Board Member Johnny Simpson, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Only board members who are members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the meeting. We have Frank Shutter, board member, and Marlo Richardson, board member, have excused absences. Becky Light, could you please call roll, please?
Ed Lang,
Here.
David Diaz,
Here.
Pastor Herrera,
Here.
Johnny Simpson,
Here.
Nancy Springer. Here.
Okay, thank you. Now, we'd like to invite everyone here, and let's introduce everyone around the table. Let's start on my right, please.
Nancy Springer, board member.
David Foe, Registrar.
Dave Diaz, board member.
Pastor Herrera, board member.
Becky Like, Enforcement Analyst.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Licensing.
Christy Shields, legal counsel for the board.
Michael Janeski, Chief of Legislation.
Johnny Simpson, board member.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Missy Vickery, Chief of Enforcement.
And yours truly, Ed Lang. Now, the member of the public, you're invited to introduce yourself, but it's not mandatory you give your name. So if you start on this side, please, and go across.
I'm Judy Slavic. I work in enforcement.
Richard Marcus.
Wendy Ballvance, Chief Testing.
Tony Porchetti. Bruce Rudman.
Irene Crowder Johnson, Slip.
Aaron Permusa.
Karen Nelson, Head of Department of Human Affairs. River Florida, Public Affairs.
Anna Rodriguez, Business Services. Tammy Gordon, Enforcement.
Caleb Cameron, Enforcement.
Renee King, Executive Director of the Builders Exchanges Stockton.
Sheriff Salzman, Contractors Licensing Center. Phyllis Stiles, PHCC.
Beverly Carr, Politico Group.
Kim Keith, Enforcement. Susan Huss, Enforcement. Amy Hall, Enforcement. Lori Dervish, Enforcement.
Steve Grove, Swift.
Tom Willis, Enforcement.
Oh. Thank you for those who wish to announce themselves, and thank you for being here. I'm pleased to start the meeting by commending the progress of the enforcement leadership in filling key position in the division. That's a very, very important job to do. Chua Barra, one of the person, will take over as program manager of the Northern Investigative Centers, filling the position of Missy Vickery, recently vacated. Chu has worked for the state of California for 23 years, the last 6 years with CSLB. Since early 2015, Chui has supervised the Sacramento South IC. Cynthia Moore, the next person, will promote it from her position as ES1 and in the Sacramento Intake and Mediation Center, IMC, to become program manager of CSLB statewide IMC operations. She will be filling the position left vacant by Scott Weber, retirement from state service. Cynthia started as an office assistant, OA, with the state in 1972 and began her career with CSLB in 1999. She was promoted to Consumer Services Representative in Norwalk in 2005, and subsequently served as Enforcement Representative in CSLB, San Bernardino, and San Diego. Cynthia has worked in the Sacramento IMC since 2010 and promoted to Unit Supervisor in 2014. I congratulate you too and give you a hand of, okay? Yeah. Is there any committee discussion on this item that we welcome those two promotees? Or then the public comment on this item? Okay, if not, let's go to agenda item B, and that's staff recognition. The Contractor State License Board, CSLB, has invested significant staff time and resources to its response to assist victims of an unprecedented series of devastating wildfires that has struck California last month. At the peak, there was 21 major burning across the state. The wildfires are responsible for killing at least 42 people, destroying more than 8,700 structures, and scorching more than 245,000 acres, and that's 382 square miles of land. CSLB role in disaster recovery is to help ensure that homes and business owners are not victimized a second time by licensed or unscrupulous contractors who might take the advantage of during this rebuilding process. 46 CSLB staff, supported by CSLB Public Affairs Office, have staffed 9 different local assistance centers. That's amazing. Established by the Governor's Office of Emergency Service or disaster relief centers, established by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. At this time, I would like to recognize those members of the CSLB staff that served as boots on the ground at the local assistance centers and disaster relief centers. I'd like to call up the staff from the various divisions to join me at the front of the room for a group photo. First, when you come, please pick up your certificate on my left and your right. I will start with administration and licensing. Will you come up, please? Administration and license, and after that, fantastic. Next will be the Enforcement Division. Please join us. That's fantastic. Okay. It is photo time. How you want us to get into this all together?
You guys have to squeeze in between the board. If I could get everyone to kind of squeeze in between the flags, that would be really helpful. Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm not. I see someone hiding. behind the flag. Okay. Yeah, you can actually come out outside. Yeah, there you go. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Couple more. Okay.
Good. We're allow our honorees to exit before we start again. They want to stay? They should stay.
Yeah.
I know that the employees that left probably had some pressing work to do, but they could have stayed another 45 minutes, if you want to tell them that. But anyway, thank you for that. Any board members have any comments on what just happened? Yes.
Yes, as Butte County, and unfortunately had them up in our office in our LAC 3 times this year, back in July, September, and again in October with the fires that we had, having had 5 of them. They do a great job. They're very professional, they're very helpful, they're very empathetic to the individuals that address them, that go up to their table. And we just hear really good things, feedback on that CSLB is there, and it's very helpful. So just huge thank you from Butte County for that, and as well as I know other counties and cities appreciate CSLB showing up in our LACs. So thank you. Huge
Excellent.
kudos to them.
Absolutely, and I hope that the supervisor staff, and I know they will, go back and tell them that too. Any other comments from the committee? And okay, any comments from the public on what you just witnessed? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll go into agenda item 3, which is public comments. This item is provided for public comments pertaining to the item on the agenda, items on the agenda, as well as item not on the agenda. However, the committee cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comments on any item on the agenda, and it is the CSLB intent to ask for public comments prior to the committee taking action on any action item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on an item should raise their hand, and they will be recognized. Also, to allow this committee sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, we will be limiting public comments to 5 minutes per individual. Is there an individual that wishes to address the committee at this time? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Let's go to agenda item D. Okay. Okay, Missy, please share with us the highlights from the enforcement program update.
Thank you, Chairman Lang. If you turn to your packets on page 11, you'll see that our vacancies in the Enforcement Division peaked in July 2017. At that time, we had approximately 31 vacancies. We worked closely with personnel to reduce that number. We had some difficulties due to the limited number of candidates in hard-to-fill locations such as the Bay Area, or a limited number of candidates on the certification eligibility lists, such as the case of the Consumer Services representative. We made significant progress in filling them, and with the new lists coming out over the summer, and as of November 1st, we only have 15 remaining vacancies where people have not been selected for the position. We're actively recruiting for those 15 vacancies presently. This is critical because, as we saw earlier, we have a lot of enforcement staff who have volunteered to serve at the local assistance centers and disaster recovery centers, and this could have an effect on our caseloads going forward, as well as our aged cases. Due to the vacancies, you will see on page 12 that the pending complaint inventory is slightly higher than we'd like to see. The manageable caseload is 3,520, and we presently have 3,904 complaints on hand. Each enforcement rep is carrying a caseload of approximately 41. The optimal caseload is 35 per enforcement rep. We believe that the large number of vacancies in the intake mediation center were a significant factor in this. Some cases were transferred to the field without a lot of mediation efforts because they were aging, and we needed to get them out to the field for investigation. The challenging news is that cases continue to come in, and we've had to redirect staff to assist with the wildfires. The good news is many of the vacancies have been filled, and we have highly motivated people who are going to do all they can to reduce the number of complaints we have on hand going forward. On page 12, you will see that the enforcement staff continue to focus on settling cases, and we're hitting almost a 50% settlement rate in the intake mediation center. That has resulted in an overall $13 million in restitution to financially injured parties, which is impressive. On page 13, you will see the goal is to disposition all but 100 complaints within 270 days of receipt. Even with the large complaint inventory on hand, last month we were able to reduce it from 117 to 112. Most offices actually have a minimal number of age complaints on hand, with the exception of 2 offices, our Special Investigations Unit that has our peace officers in it, and our West Covina Investigative Center, largely because of vacancies. With case handling assistance provided by our retired annuitant auditor, we believe that we're going to see a significant reduction in these by the end of the year. Also on page 13, we talk about the wildfires. To date, we've had 46 staff attend the local assistance centers or the disaster recovery centers. They work long hours, 10 to 12-hour days, and often are driving 2 to 3.5 hours each way to get there. It's not uncommon for someone to work an 18-hour day. And staff have even stayed over and worked again the next day. So it's really an effort that we applaud. In one local assistance center, staff saw over 700 survivors in a single day. We are also the boots on the ground, posting signs in fire areas, warning unlicensed contractors that they can face felony charges if they're caught contracting without a license in a disaster area. We're working with local building departments in each of the fire-ravaged areas to ensure they have CSLB literature and contact information for fire victims. We're also making sure we have a sufficient number of contractors available to rebuild homes by working with the North Coast Builders Exchange, as well as passing out information regarding our licensing workshop that's going to be held here in Sacramento on November 17th. And then in subsequent months, that's the 3rd Friday of every month in different locations. We were working 2 people in each local assistance center, so that was 18 people on each day until November 1st, where we took it down to 1 person for each assistance center, with the exception of Santa Rosa, because they continue to see the most survivors. There's 6 centers still open, and some of them are going through the end of November. Again, that is going to be taxing on our resources. This can have an effect on age cases as well. Turning to page 15, you will see that in 2017, our SWIFT staff conducted 63 sting operations in partnership with other state agencies, local law enforcement, and district attorney's offices. In addition, the partnership with other state agencies, SWIFT has conducted 236 sweep days during the same time frame. This has resulted in 2,870 cases, of which 1,410 resulted in administrative or criminal action. There's a breakdown of that on chart 15, on page 15 as well. On page 16, you will see that SWIFT has issued 573 licensee and non-licensee administrative citations and assessed almost $580,000 in citation civil penalties. Our SWIFT unit continues to focus on larger targets and performs license compliance checks during sweeps. On page 17, you'll see that SWIFT has issued 575 stop orders. These stop orders are issued at job sites where there is workers' comp violations. Staff also provide information on our licensing workshops to unlicensed contractors as part of an education campaign to assist them in becoming licensed. Failure to comply with the stop order is a misdemeanor criminal offense. At the bottom of page 17, you'll see a photo of our Central Valley SWIFT staff during the 2-day training on sweeps that are aimed at improving safety, effectiveness, and efficiency during sweeps. All SWIFT units have now received the training. On page 18, you'll see a picture of an employee in a tree and then the tree being topped. This is one of the cases that they came across during the sweep training. The homeowner had hired their unlicensed gardener to cut the tree down for $2,200, and that unlicensed contractor in turn subcontracted it out to another unlicensed individual who was performing the work without workers' comp. Both unlicensed contractors are facing criminal charges. On page 18, you will also see a highlight for our Special Investigations Unit. This case involves a garage door company that's ripping off people in numerous states. San Diego DA Paul Greenwood did a presentation at the last NASCLA meeting where he informed attendees from different states the need to share information regarding companies like Garage Door Services and Repair, who target seniors and price gouge them for garage door repairs when replacing the entire door would have been more cost effective. The technician in this case pleaded guilty to 4 counts of felony elder financial abuse, and the accusation against the licensee who works in multiple states is pending. That concludes my update. Chairman Lang.
Thank you, Missy, for that excellent report. Are there any comments from the committee? Let me go with, okay, go ahead.
On page 11, I have a question in regards to some of the positions there. On the ER2 peace officer and the ER1, it says that they withdrew and rejected. Was there like a specific reason that you can speak to of why that happened?
Are you talking about the one in Norwalk?
Right, well, it says Norwalk and Central. I was just curious why, you offered the job and then they declined or rejected.
We sent him the background packet, and then he said he was no longer interested.
Okay,
He didn't
so
give
just
a
not
reason.
interested.
Yes.
Wasn't anything to do?
No,
Okay.
it was an outside candidate.
And then you have several on the bottom there, CSR positions, Norwalk and Sacramento, where no eligible candidates. I'm curious, so when you post,
So at the time that this was developed, we had, our current consumer services representative list had very limited candidates, but since then, we've received a new list, so they've retested. But I do want to caution that in one specific location, Norwalk to be exact, they had 4 vacancies last month, and they got 4 applications. So we're finding it difficult, so we're looking at the possibility of advertising in both Norwalk and Sacramento and conducting interviews in both locations, because we may have to transfer positions from one location to the other so that we can fill those vacancies going forward.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just moving forward on that same topic here, are most of these CSR positions open to both state employees and the public, or
It is an open list.
So it's an open list, and you're still only getting minimal applicants?
Right.
Wow. Is that something that DCA handles, or do you handle the recruitment?
DCA handles the examination process, but I think what we've been discussing in meetings is going forward for our CSR classification as well as our enforcement representative classification, going out to colleges and universities and attending their job fairs. So that's something we're going to be working with the personnel department to increase our awareness of these classifications.
Yes, because, I'm an adjunct at one of the CSU campuses, And, the career centers are always looking for, opportunities for agencies like yours to kind of be there at the job fairs to really recruit some of their students, which I think is that the entry-level position for?
It's a little bit above entry level, a consumer
Okay.
services representative. Typically, you see most people entering the state workforce as an office tech or a program
Okay.
technician. So this is a little bump above in the pay grade.
Okay,
But it's still an entry level that someone could easily test to get on the certification list.
well, I'm sure if you contacted the career centers at the CSU campuses, that would be a good way to get the
That's an
publicity.
excellent idea, and we're going to have staff work with our personnel office to do that.
And I know the public affairs office on a weekly basis, they kind of list your openings. And that's really good as a way to get the word out that you are looking for
Yes.
individuals for those positions. Well, thank you on that one. And I just had a question on the, on page 12, on the pending investigations and the workload. Are you allowed to use overtime to kind of help you with that overload as far as case investigations or mediation?
Overtime is approved on a case-by-case basis, but we find that it's more effective to utilize overtime in our intake mediation centers and get the cases resolved at that level if there's no serious disciplinary issues, rather than in our investigative center. So the key is to controlling the complaints that are coming in the door so that they don't go to the investigative centers. It should be just those who are we're looking for violations of the Business and Professions Code. So yes, we are looking at overtime.
The other question I had, or comment, on page 18, you kind of highlighted some cases that you've investigated. I do miss the cases that were reported in the past. There was several of them. There might be 4 or 5. They're very interesting to just see what you're doing.
You will see them return in next month's board meeting.
Thank you. Okay.
We had so much information to include in this packet. We limited it to the topics we were actually
Yeah,
discussing.
And I think it's a good way to get the word out of what you're doing, and very good examples of the good casework and investigations that your staff does. So it's a very good way of getting that word out, believe me. But anyway, that was a comment. And the last thing I had is on page 19 on the Coffee with a Cop Day. I thought that was a really innovative way of getting the word out about the work of the Contractor State License Board and just meeting with the community. I don't know if there's some way to maybe get that institutionalized with the SSS forums that are held, so that to public affairs, maybe looking at possibilities of doing some outreach in the community with that type of a format. I thought that was very, very good.
Sure, we'll look into that.
I don't have any specific recommendations, but maybe we could talk about them at a
Okay.
later time, okay?
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So just to go off what past Bester said here on page 12, so going from 3520 to the 33,904, and it seems to me with all the fires that's probably going to increase even more.
The complaints still
So
come in.
just glad to hear that you're looking at that and on top of this, because, you can have burnout and people really getting overwhelmed and overworked, so
Yeah,
to avoid errors, and
right.
so glad to hear that. Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate all of the comments, and I'm sure that Enforcement Chief will be taking note of that. Any other comments from the committee? Okay, what about the public? Okay, if none, seeing none and hearing none, let's move to agenda item E. And on that is an update, discussion, and possible action regarding workers' compensation enforcement strategies, resources, and accomplishment. Missy, could you update the committee on what's been doing there?
Thank you, Chairman Lang. CSLB continues to work hard to develop strategies to address licensees with false workers' comp exemptions on file. We previously reported that we looked into 4 targeted classifications, including concrete, earthwork, landscaping, and paving, and tree trimming, and that normally require outdoor construction. And of those we looked at, 59% of the time there was a false exemption on file. At our September 2017 board meeting, Jennifer Vargan from State Funds spoke to the board and expressed an interest in working with CSLB to address workers' comp compliance and accurate reporting of payroll. This is important because although we continue to address workers' comp violations proactively through SWIFT and in our investigative centers, it is still a big problem and we need to start moving the needle in the right direction. On page 24, you will see our new strategies. We continue to share CSLB's workers' comp data with interested parties who may want to pursue their own legislation, similar to the roofers wanting to pursue their legislation for their classification. We're working with the Chief of Legislation, Mike Jimnetsky, who is helping putting a briefing together for administrative law judges to educate them on the effects on the underground economy and the problem. The paper will also encourage them to consider upholding the maximum penalties for workers' comp violations. We're considering future legislation to increase the civil penalty to $15,000. But prior to doing that, we believe that it's important to educate the staff to have them increase the penalty to the current maximum, which is $5,000, so we can demonstrate a need for the increased penalties. This will be similar to the maximum fine that is imposed on other underground economies, such as aiding and abetting. We're working with the Chief of Legislation on a legislative proposal to increase the statute of limitations from 1 year to 2 years for unlicensed contractors who have evidence of workers. This is parallel to what is already required for licensees. We're considering submitting a legislative proposal to amend Business and Professions Code Section 7145.5 to permit CSLB's judgment unit to assist in the collection of SCIF audit assessments. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Chairman Ling, who will recommend the establishment of an advisory committee to develop strategies to work with other state agencies.
Thank you, Missy. At this time, I'd like to recommend 2-person advisory committee, myself and Board Chair Kevin Albanese, who will work with the following government agencies to make recommendation to address workers' compensation avoidance. Number 1, Employment Development Department. That's a taxing agency that chairs the Joint Enforcement Strikes Force. Next is the California Occupational Safety and Health Administration. As a lead for employment work condition, they may be able to assist in identifying contractors without workers' compensation. Number 3, Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, ensuring that workers receive wages owed, that they can aid in identifying workers' compensation avoidance through wage claims. And number 4, California Department of Insurance, and that's CDI, responsible for investigating workers' compensation insurance premium fraud. CDI provides funding for the prosecution of workers' compensation insurance violations. Now, are there any comments from the committee on that?
Mr. Chair, did
Yes.
you mention the State Compensation Insurance Fund also? Is that the one you mean?
The CDI, California Department of Insurance.
Oh,
Did that
okay.
cover that? Is that?
Is this time to discuss the?
Yeah, please.
proposal? Based on our last discussion at our board meeting, the State Compensation Insurance Fund also indicated their interest in helping us or partnering with us in this effort. And Missy, I didn't know whether it might be appropriate to add them as a member of this subcommittee to help us in that effort.
Sure, we can do that.
You could call them or whatever you think it might be of interest, because I think they play a very important role. And I remember one of the board members asked the question whether they did any outreach And their response was that they really didn't, as far as I remember. And so I think they can play also a good role in seeing, not only seeing what the problem is, but maybe being creative as to see what kind of premium packages they could offer people, because I think really the main problem is the cost to contractors. And I think they might be a good agency to kind of guide us through that in developing maybe some type of a premium package that it would be available for contractors.
I agree with that. We'll add them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Dave?
Yeah, reading this, isn't that what the subcommittee's supposed to come up with, is the strategy? So we can add, or they will recommend adding whoever they want into these.
Well, they come back with recommendations to
Correct.
this
To the
committee,
committee.
and
Correct.
this committee will make recommendations to the full board.
What I'm asking is what pastor's asking for, the subcommittee will do that and add maybe more.
Yeah, I think depending on how your motion would be structured, you could include the authority for them to consider other agencies in addition to the ones listed here that they may find.
Yeah, because in this, it says strategies such as, so in other words, or such as those. So in other words, it's not hard and set.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's open, because I was going to ask our counselor if we need to, at least an amended motion to add that, or the subcommittee can add it as we go along.
There's a motion on the next page that
Yes.
already says other governmental.
Mhm.
Here, I don't know. I think
Okay.
it covers
Yeah.
everything.
Okay, is it okay to, we're going to move on, and then we'll see what happens on this.
You certainly can suggest a motion, and
Yeah.
then the committee can discuss whether they want to amend that motion or.
Okay. Dave, you want to make sure that's in concrete, Pastor?
So I so move,
Okay.
if you want us to
okay.
formalize the motion.
Okay,
So-
state your motion for the addition.
I move that we support the staff recommendations as listed in in our board packet here, and that they consider other agencies as appropriate,
Can I suggest a friendly amendment?
whatever.
So I would request that the Enforcement Committee appoint a two-person advisory committee made up of Mr. Lang and Board Chair Kevin Albanese that will partner with other government agencies to make recommendations to address workers' compensation avoidance, and the committee will report back to the Enforcement Committee at a future meeting.
Perfect, couldn't have said it better.
We'll corn that, and it's been moved properly. It's been properly moved and second. Now, let's get some more comments before we continue to move on. Any other comments on what we just talked about? Any comments from the public? And I believe, oh, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Markison, certainly it goes without saying that the industry supports your effort to address the workers' compensation issue, and certainly my clients would be happy to assist your subcommittee with evaluating and making recommendations for strategies, and I'm sure the rest of the contractor community feels similar.
Thank you very much for that assistance. Any other comments from the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. No, okay, would you would you give us a roll call, please?
Ed Lang,
Yeah, yes.
David Diaz,
Yep.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, and we will use the language of our council on that one, okay? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's go to agenda item F. Update and discussion regarding CSLB Solar Task Force, which is always amongst us. Missy, would you please provide an update on the solar task force?
Sure, thank you, Chairman Ling. Over the last few years, as solar installations have become more popular, CSLB has seen an increase in the number of solar-related consumer complaints. At our September 2015 board meeting, we introduced a solar task force to assist in the handling of complaints. Since this time, the task force continues to receive complaints regarding various forms of misrepresentations. However, CSLB has observed the evolution of a different and increasingly complex type of complaint related to property assessed clean energy, otherwise known as PACE financing. At the request of the board during the September 2017 board meeting, staff conducted an in-depth analysis into our current solar trends. On page 29, you will see that CSLB has received 933 solar-related complaints during the time period of January 1st, 2016 through September 1st, 2017. We've been working hard to settle these complaints, which has resulted in 197 of those complaints being settled and over $1 million in restitution to the public. 97 of those cases resulted in recommendation for disciplinary action, including 15 criminal complaints. I would like to draw your attention to the chart on page 30. Based on the data available, we conducted a year-over-year analysis from January through September. In 2016, we received 197 complaints compared to the same time period in 2017, when we received 417 complaints. This represents a 112% increase. The percentage of leases remains stagnant, but the percentage of power purchase agreements decreased, and the number of complaints that we received that had PACE financing also increased. The majority of the complaints we received are privately funded. Nearly 40% of the complaints filed during the time period of January 1st, 2016 through September 2017 were filed against 22 contractors. The majority of complaints involve misrepresentation of contract terms and solar panel production, as well as include a home improvement salesperson registration and contract form violations. So you ask, where do we go from here? The Solar Task Force is working with the industry to reduce consumer solar-related complaints, referred to the CSLB investigative centers, by 50% by a target date of June 2018. The strategies we have implemented include trained staff will continue to work with the contractors those 22 contractors who receive the majority of complaints to improve business practices. An example is reviewing common violations with them and encourage them to change their business practices going forward. And in instances where a consumer files a complaint, letting them know that they need to take immediate action to resolve the issues at hand before it's transferred to an investigative center for possible violations of contractor law and facing disciplinary action. We have built relationships with prosecutors across California to pursue criminal charges in the most egregious cases. And we have a partnership with the Federal Trade Commission to investigate contractors who target homeowners with specific ethnic backgrounds. An example of that is the contract is negotiated in Spanish, but the documentation in the contract that they provide to the consumer is written in English. And they might not fully understand that whatever you negotiate the contract in, it should be also provided in that language in written form. CSLB hosted an informational roundtable on September 6, 2017 with industry and government partners with the goal of discussing trends and the ever-evolving solar industry. This forum allowed CSLB leadership and staff to anticipate issues that may arise in the future. The following action items were a result of the roundtable. We will continue to work with CalCIA to develop strategies to reduce the complaints. We will partner with industry to identify elements required in solar system, panel system contracts. We will continue to monitor the workforce sufficiency with the assistance of California Building Officials Association as the Title 24 requirements approach in 2019. I would like to thank Johnny Simpson for participating in the round table. Johnny, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just, within the solar industry, this is an important industry, not just for our state, but for our nation. It's, as this industry grows, and it has grown over the years to employ many, many Californians and help them to feed their families and help our contractors to create a nice, stable platform of revenue and those sort of things where they can do that. The problem that I see within the solar industry and some of these folks that are operating outside the lines, by doing those sort of things, they hurt our industry. And they hurt our industry to the point where if the consumers lose faith, then they're not going to buy these systems. And then what's going to happen to our state's air and air quality and all of the things that we're trying to work on. So in order to make sure that, that we can achieve our greenhouse goals and do the things that the governor and the legislature has signed into law for us, we need to make sure that the CSLB does its job, and I think we did a very good job of it, and I think we're working hard on it, and I just want to thank you for putting the meeting together and getting started. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
We also had a very informative meeting with the Department of Business Oversight to discuss our two agencies and how they're going to partner to implement AB 1284. AB 1284 is legislation that is intended to enhance consumer protection for individuals who participate in a PACE program, not always solar related. That concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Missy. Excellent reporting. Are there any committee discussions? Yes, please.
Yeah, did this solar task force only deal with solar panels, or did it deal with energy storage, anything like that? Did they look at what's coming up? I sit on a lot of different committees throughout the state and country, and I think this board, actually in general, not just with solar, but other aspects of like the plumbing, with you got rainwater catchment and different systems, gray water and all that coming in, we really got to pay attention to the proper licensing, doing the work, and it's something we really need to start looking at maybe now. Maybe this is better for licensing and enforcement, but I don't want, as a board member, I don't want things to get crossed or whatever. I don't want a certain license, I'll just use plumbing for an example, to all of a sudden somebody starts thinking, well, I got I'll say a C20 license, and they're starting to do plumbing and cross-contaminating lines that are gray water going into potable backup water system and all that. So maybe it's more of a licensing issue. I just wanted to know what this task force looked at is if they're looking more towards the future too, because there's so many different technologies coming in, and I know the requirements of Title 24, especially 2019 Title 24, is looking a lot more towards that. So did you guys reach out to the CEC or anything and see anything with that?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
The complaints that we're looking at now are primarily solar panel installations for homes.
So the task force was just set up for the complaints?
Right.
Okay, so I just wondered if it was going to expand.
I would just add that we are now starting to track the classification of the contractor as it relates to the complaints.
Cool. Yes, Pastor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on page 29 of the statistical analysis, where you indicate that you have received 933 complaints, and 197 were closed with restitution, which is approximately 21%, and 97 were, I guess, can't read my notes here. Well, you took about 97 of them were disciplinary action. Okay, I'm sorry. And so that leaves 639 complaints, which is 68%. What's happened to those?
Unfortunately, a large percentage of complaints that come in the door, people file complaints for one reason or another, and then they get a notification when they're filing the complaint that they need to submit the paperwork. And then We also place a call to each individual, asking them to turn in the paperwork and send another letter. And they sometimes don't respond to our contacts. And so those complaints are closed because we didn't receive the documentation to go forward. And so that's something that is kind of reflective in our statistics, is we don't address every complaint because sometimes we didn't get enough information to find out if it was a power purchase agreement or if it was a PACE financing. So there's a whole category of complaints that we can't address because they're not identified with enough information. So the consumer has to be willing to move forward, and sometimes they resolve their situation because when they do file a complaint, the parties get notification and they encourage them to resolve the issues as well.
Well, that's really unfortunate that they don't pursue it, you know.
Maybe they could resolve the complaint on their own.
Hopefully they did, or maybe the
Yes.
contractor came through, which is good. Board Member Simpson, I agree with your comments on, you know, the industry and, you know, the consumer's impact when you do have some bad apples out there in the industry. And I was just wondering here on page 30 where you talk about that there were 22 contractors, I guess, that you did take some action against. What I've seen anecdotally is that it's really the home improvement salesperson that does the selling. And I was just wondering, have you taken action against any of the home improvement salespeople or just the contractor?
Yes, we have taken action against home improved salespersons.
You do?
Mhm.
And how is that reflected so that consumers know that that person, they should be careful about not doing business with them? I mean, you have information on the contractor, right?
Right.
On your website that some disciplinary action was taken against the contractor, unfortunately. But is there any way to identify the salesperson here?
Yes, there.
Not that I want to hammer them, but, you know.
Laura?
So the HIS registrants are considered licensees under the law, so their disciplinary actions are posted online as well. So when you look at the online complaint lookup, you can find the HIS and find any action taken.
So that's out there, okay. The other thing on page 31 concerning the partnership with the FTC, and I commend you for taking the partnership also with the local prosecutory agencies. What I've seen lately also is the AG's office, maybe under Attorney General Becerra, has really been having an interest in cases that impact non-English speaking people. So that might be another source of prosecutory action
Okay.
For you to consider a look at. And if there's anything I can do there to help in some way, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any more comments from the committee? Very good. I really appreciate your excellent questioning of the report and appreciate the feedback, and it helps us do our work. Yes, from the public.
My name is Bruce Rudman.
Yes.
I represent a lot of solar contractors. Not here for that, I'm here for the B license issue. But on the issue of solar, and I'm actually kind of pleased at the number, only because it says that during this study, 12,000 residential installs happen per month, and we're talking about an 8-month period. So 96,000 installations happened, and you had 900 installs. Now, that 900 is still too high, but I will be willing to bet that of the 900 complaints, more than half deal with the amount of production that their solar system is generating. And in the business that I deal with, I'll say that 85–90% of the complaints that come in against my clients are about how much solar their system is generating. It's not making what they were represented and so forth. And it's not necessarily a word of art, but we have what we call the solar syndrome. When a salesperson goes out and sells a job, he asks them for their last 6 months or 12 months of electric bill. And they give them that, and that's how they size the system. They have a formula. They look at how much sunlight will come to that house, usually in Southern California, for example, 5 hours a day. They look at how many watts they use a month on average, and they size a system. And what happens is you get someone like my wife. who turns off the lights and doesn't turn on the air when we leave the house, and who we run and try to be efficient. And now you got a solar system, free electricity. And you find that the people are using significantly more electricity than what they were using before. And so what I'm focusing on here is perhaps some better education, both of the consumer and perhaps of the contractors, so that the consumer knows, for example, if I were to buy a solar system, and I can't because of the way my house faces, I would buy a system that's 20% bigger than what I use now, because I know I'll use more electricity if I believe it's, quote, free. That's my only comment. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Vickery, but I'll bet you that more than half of your complaints are about the amount of production that is being generated, and they told me I would get no bill, and I'm astonished that my one bill per year is in the thousands of dollars instead of $50 or something like that.
It is one of our top concerns.
Yeah, thank you.
What was your name again, and who do you represent? I'm sorry.
Oh, Bruce Rudman. I'm with Abdulaziz Gross Barton Rudman, and I'm not necessarily going to say which solar companies I represent, but I represent a lot of them, including some of the bigger ones. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, for your coming forward and giving us your comments on that, because there are a lot of consumer tips in there that we like to have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
sir.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Markson for WICA. Your written report does not mention the new requirements that CSLB will have vis-a-vis the PUC pursuant to AB 1070. I'm sure your staff has discussed that with you, but that would certainly seem to be a natural carry-on for your task force to engage the PUC in those discussions on the solar disclosure form that will be required.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Be considered. Any more public comments? Okay, hearing none.
Excuse me, Mr. Markison, that'll be a ledge committee agenda on the 8th of next week. It's an agenda item.
Thank you. Sure. Very good. Okay, moving right along. Let's go to agenda item G. Discussion and possible action regarding strategies to address owner-builder construction permit and unlicensed activity violations. I'd like Board Member Nancy Springer for leading the discussion in September of 2017 board meeting regarding options to increase contractor compliance with local building permit requirements, focusing on permit avoidance and fraudulent or misuse of owner-builder permit. I know that's a mouthful, but Nancy, I think you can handle that. Let us know. Will you give us something to add on that?
What this was, sorry. So what we had discussed is several things of, there has been violations in regards to contractors having owner builders come in and pull permits, not the contractor pulling the permit, and then them not realizing the need to make sure that the contractor's in there. Sorry, got sidetracked there for a minute. But we have forms in the building departments that was agreed to, I think 2005, there was a memorandum there was an agreement between the license board and local building officials to have a very informative form to owner builders where there's like about 12 statements that they would initial and recognize, and we would confirm that's the owner, that the responsibility that they're taking on as an owner builder, that if they're not hiring this licensed contractor, then they ultimately are responsible. It talks about the workers' comps, it talks about what happens if something goes wrong with the project, and basically that they're assuming that authority. So that was one of the forms that they had agreed upon, and we used that. Just about every building department I've spoke to has that exact same form or a very likeness to it. And I spoke to that. I've had several times where our owner builder starts filling out that form and actually reading it, because we make them fill it out right there in the office. And as they're signing it, they get down to about the 6th item, and then they say, you know what, I'll be back. And then the next thing we know, contractors come back to pull that permit. So in that case, it was a very informative form. It's letting them know, and it's working in that way. However, if they do want to become the owner builder, then they sign that form and they know their responsibilities. So what we were looking at was to go through some of these other compliance issues on maintaining that form, whether we need to update that form, talking with outreaching to other building departments. There's a lot of new people out there, and maintaining this form and other ways to assist the CSLB in identifying any kind of permit problems we're having with this issue. So whereas CSLB would create a list of local building departments that are helping with that, and then they do have a draft letter in here that will be coming up. And then also possibility of that when maybe changing, implementing some provisions within the Business and Profession Code 7092, maybe make some changes on requiring some kind of education or training for contractors that are in violation of those requirements. Is that correct?
Thank you. David?
Nancy, and you work for a building department. Is there a high percentage of permits that get pulled and don't get closed?
Yes.
So that's also an issue, because I've been dealing with at the CPUC, on the HVAC end, is that they were giving refunds or the utilities for changing out HVAC units. They required a permit pulled but not closed out, so that it never got inspected. So it has to go further than just a permit pulling. It has to be closed out. And I don't know how we can get that language in there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, David, for those questions. Missy, would you please update the committee on your strategies?
Sure, as discussed by Nancy during our September 2017 board meeting and today. The Enforcement Division is working hard to increase contractor compliance in regards to permits and owner-builder permits. As Nancy was saying, we have now a permit violation form that we've added to our SWIFT website so that they can fill that out there and report any activity. And we have SWIFT staff that are going to go out there on active job sites to verify that they're, what they're doing. So it is important to address these problems because it could jeopardize public safety and present an uneven playing field for contractors who are complying with code requirements. During the last 4 years, we've investigated 4,400 permit violation complaints, and we took discipline on 1,200 of those. So strategies going forward, as Nancy stated, are listed on page 35 of your packet, and they include requiring contractors in violation of permit requirements to take a permit-related course. We will work with county building officials to identify those courses and refine the requirements. We're going to review the existing MOU between CSLB and CalBO, and on a smaller basis, conduct outreach to local building departments asking for their cooperation in reporting local permit violations. As Nancy said, a draft of that letter is in your packet on page 36. Does anyone have any edits that they would like to propose for the letter?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I have some, which maybe I could just share with you later, Missy, if you don't mind.
Sure.
They're minor, but I was just thinking of the person that's reading this. Nancy, I have a question for you. Since you're involved as a building official, do you think that the majority of building officials know what the role of Contractor State License Board is in its regulatory authority over, these issues, like, that a contractor should? Well, I mean, based on the problem here that we're seeing, do you think that they know that they should refer these type of cases to contractors or issues to Contractor State License Board?
I can't speak for all of them, not knowing every single one of them. What I can say, my experience in discussions with building officials is that we're well aware of the role that we can work with the license board when we do have complaints and reach out, and they always respond back to us, and if not, we contact them to get back to us. And we have taken a recent approach on educating some new people that have gone into building departments. We had mentioned that back in September, we had an actual meeting here with the Sacramento Valley Association of Building Officials, where Dave, the registrar here, and his staff kind of talked about how we can help each other. So I think continuing that will just even cement that partnership more and keep them informed.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Southern California because, for example, LA County has 83 cities, and each of them probably have their own building building inspector departments. And I really don't know if they really know that, the role of contractors, state license board is. I don't know if that was a thought of having a meeting maybe in Southern California also, so that they know about this initiative here. I'm not sure that would be appropriate.
So just to add to that, we do have the California Building Official Group. There is a member in the room here today, board member. And that is something that we use we take advantage of the annual business meeting once a year, and we request CSLB to come and speak and build that partnership and identifying throughout the state, because all the state officials attend that, and there's lots of training there. So that is one way and one means that is happening, but that is a thought of what we did here that I'll be talking to Dave about the possibility of doing down south.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really very good initiative on part of, and it's a proactive initiative on part of the Contractor State License Board to really get the word out that this is an issue that we're very interested in, and we want to tackle it up front. And so the more people know about it, the better it will be.
Absolutely. David?
Nancy, does CalBO deal with all, I think it's 585 building departments or authorities having jurisdiction in California, including the UC and the other one? Pretty much all of them? Okay, thank you.
Yes. It's generic to this. Come on, let's come to the podium.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Shane Diller. There we go. I'm Shane Diller. I'm on the CalBO Board of Directors and the chair of the State Licensing Committee. So I want to thank Nancy for making sure that we knew about today's meeting and regularly providing us information and updates on your efforts. Yes, CalBO does connect with all building departments, even at the college levels, at the UCs and CSUs. We also connect with all of the private industry that serve as contract building officials to cities and counties across the state. Not all choose to participate as full members, but all are, all of them receive our materials, all of them receive invitation to our education weeks and our offerings there in our annual business meeting. So we make our effort there. We encourage all of them to participate and to take advantage of those efforts. I'm primarily here today to, again, kind of receive information and watch where you're headed with these efforts so that CalBO can be an active participant and partner in them. And CalBO is committed to making sure that we're an active partner with the CSLB and that we're using our venues and avenues for communication and education to pass along the important messages related to license compliance, workman's compensation requirements, and those sorts of things. So as this progresses, should the board or the legislature choose to amend the state code to require CEU training or require some sort of further effort on a contractor's part when they've run afoul of the system, we're here to partner with making sure that training can be provided and that it's available across the state and that everybody's sort of receiving the same message. Anything we can do to be of help in that effort, we're here to do. So, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Okay. I have one question for the council. I know Pastoral mentioned that he had some more recommendation on a subject. Is it apropos for him to say them now, or he's inserted that he will add his comments later? Will that be part of our committee report going forward? I have no idea what his recommendation would be.
Well, I mean, I think he should probably complete his recommendations for the
Okay.
record.
And that's okay, right? As long as it's in the...
They're related to the letter, correct?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Thank you for the clarification. That's all? You're all right?
Okay, yeah. I, just real briefly, on the bullet points there, where you give the contractor state license website, I thought to make things easier for the recipient, the building official, if you have a direct link to the actual form that they should be completing. And I did not know whether that's one of the easy fill forms. You could also put that icon on the homepage so that building officials could just, if they do go to the Contractor State License Board homepage, they could click on that and they'll take them directly there. Or in the letter, you can put the direct link for that form, and I think it may be more convenient. And also, I guess Jess Flores is your contact person. In that last paragraph, you indicate if you have any further questions or concerns. I don't know if you wanted to just revise that to say if you have any further questions or wish additional information, so that people feel comfortable that they should contact Mr. Flores. And also, in the very last sentence, there's thank you in advance for your assistance, and I would just add and cooperation.
Okay.
And I think that's it. And Nancy, I don't know, I guess I'll throw this question to you. I don't know if it's appropriate to send maybe a brochure on what Contractor State License Board does, or the other thing is maybe copy the county CEO about this program. Because you as an official report to the Chief Executive Office or the Chief Administrative Office of your city or the county, right, or city manager, right?
It varies. It depends on the organization of the city or the county. Some of us have directors that we go through, and then the director reports on up to that, to the city managers or whoever, or to the board or council.
Maybe I guess we can just leave that alone. I don't think we need to pursue that. But, the more people know about the initiative, the better it is. But, I mean, that's additional staff work that you have to research who the CEO or the city manager is of the city. So we'll just leave that one alone. Okay? Thank you.
And just to add to that, I have a board that is very cooperative, so whenever items like this happen, I usually will bring that up to them, send it up to them, let them know, hey, this is what's going on and stuff. So I think most of us inform them what's going on because it's a win-win situation where we're partnering up, and so they like to be informed.
There's one more thing here, that one of the bullet points that it says report the suspected violation to either Contractor State License Board, either through your local CSLB liaison. Would they know who that is, or would you attach a list of contacts for them?
Yes, we have employees who are assigned to different locations who partner with the building departments. So, and we're identifying those people right now.
Perfect.
So will you be, I guess I have a similar question then, so will we be putting that, when you send that letter out, would you be putting that list so that they're aware, just in case they're not aware who that liaison is?
Yes.
Can that be added material? Thank you.
So that would be an attachment then to the letter, right?
Very good.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. At this time, based on the communication and discussion we've had, I recommend the formation of a two-person advisory council comprised of board member Nancy Springer and board member Linda Clifford, who will explore and recommend for enforcement committee approval the implementation of various strategies targeting violation of local building permit requirements. At this point, we've had our discussions, unless you have any more discussion, but then any discussion from the public? Then I would like to, oh, go ahead, sorry. All right.
Greg Stowe, Sacramento County. I am fortunate enough, I work in the violations unit with the building department and work very closely with the board. And it's, since the economy's come back, and you have more staffing, we're building a reputation back that we had years ago before the economy tanked. One of the issues is dealing with the home flippers. I know you folks have some challenges with what you can do. And so if we can work on dealing with flippers so we can have, better teeth on both ends would be a good thing, because that's a huge problem for us. They flip the home, they don't get permits, young couple comes in, buys a home, now they have a problem, and they get in violation, and it's just a tough spot for them. So if we could put home flippers towards the top of that list, and of course, the truthful people that say they're owner builders are probably minor. Most of them, I think, are not actual owner builders. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming forward. Okay, at this time, any more public comments? Okay, then, I'd like to, matter of fact, I asked for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Anybody?
Can you just restate the motion for the record, please?
Okay. I'd like to ask for a motion for the Enforcement Committee to form a two-person advisory committee made up of Board Member Nancy Springer and Board Member Linda Clifford to explore strategies to increase contractor compliance with local building permit requirements. The advisory committee will report back to the Enforcement Committee at a future meeting. I need a motion and a second. Okay. Second. It's been properly moved and second. Are there any comments from the committee? Public, you have any comments on the motion? Becky, will you give us a roll call?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yes.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Thank you. Motion passed. So move right along to our last item, Agenda Item H. Strategic Plan Update, Discussion, and Possible Action of 2017-18 Enforcement Objectives. Missy, will you provide us an update, please?
Sure. The enforcement objectives are listed on page 39 of your packet. 2.1 is to formalize strategy to identify licensee misuse of workers' compensation insurance requirement. We discussed this in item E, whereas we are recommending the establishment of an advisory committee and would like the enforcement committee to consider revising the target date from March 2017 to June 2018, as indicated in your packet. Item 2.2, reduce legal action expenditures while not compromising consumer protection. Legislation has been approved that gives CSLB the authority for a letter of admonishment. We are working with the Chief of Legislation to develop procedures for implementation, such as a process for appeals. 2.3, expand proactive enforcement targets. We are already doing this as we continue to appreciate any leads or referrals anyone has. 2.4, update on civil penalties. We discussed this in the workers' comp section. We have met with the Attorney General's office and requested a meeting with the Office of Administrative Hearings to request support for sustaining larger civil penalties. 2.5, increase C10 electrical license renewals by $20 to fund electrician certification enforcement. This is under consideration by the IT Change Control Board, and regulatory hearings are tentatively scheduled for the early part of 2018. That concludes my update.
Do
Thank
we
you,
need a
Missy.
motion on the change?
Yes.
Just for the one change, or?
Just, yeah, one change.
You can give that just a minute. I'd like to motion to approve the target date change for 2.1 from March 8, 2018, as noted in the September 29, 2017 board packet, to June 2018. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Okay. Are there any comments from the committee? Committee members? Hearing and seeing none. What about the public? Okay. Becky, would you give us a roll call?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yeah.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Motion passed. Here's that time. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. It's been properly, are you a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that we adjourn. Thank you, thank you. And 10 minutes, please. That'd be 11:30.
She needs to take roll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ed Lang.
Yes.
David Diaz. Yes. Pastor Herrera.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Thank you.
So licensing will start at
And 11:30.
11:30.
Yes.
Yes, will the November 3rd, 2017 Licensing Committee meeting of the Contractors State License Board come to order? I'm Nancy Springer, and I've been appointed by the board chair to run the meeting in Marlo Richardson's absence. Only board members who are members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the discussion. Committee members Marlo Richardson and Frank Shetter have an excused absence for today. Laura, will you please check for a quorum?
David Diaz,
Present.
Pastor Herrera,
Present.
Ed Lang,
Present.
Johnny Simpson,
Present.
Nancy Springer.
Here. Next, I would like to invite everyone at the table to introduce themselves. We will start with the committee members and staff introductions, beginning to my left.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Licensing.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Johnny Simpson, board member.
Michael Janetsky, Chief of Legislation.
Christy Shilch, Legal Counsel for the board.
Missy Vickery, Chief of Enforcement.
Pastor Herrera, board member.
Dave Diaz, board member.
David Foe, Registrar.
Ed Lang, board member.
Okay. Okay, at this point, I'd just like to make an opening statement here, and that is that we did talk about a lot of the wildfires and being so close in my jurisdiction, as well as living in the Cascade area and also driving through a firestorm of the Redwood Fire. I think it's important that we just take a minute to put our hearts out there and just let all these individuals know that we're here, we're helping them, we care about them, we're here to support as a huge community all together, and sorry for those that have lost their lives, their homes, their belongings. This is really a hard time for them all, and just recognizing that, and that the board's here to do whatever they can to help them out. So I just wanted to make that statement. Do I have any other comments from the committee members?
Yeah,
Dave?
real quick, my brother is a business rep for the local that I work for, and he's the business rep in Santa Rosa, and he was in a community meeting, and Eric Stevens, I know he works for the CSLB, and my brother mentioned that he was very professional and how everything came out, and he introduced himself and all that, and then my brother walked up and, oh, my brother's a board member, blah, blah, blah. So, but he really said that he was really commended him how professional they acted and everything else over in Santa Rosa, so it was kind of nice to hear that, as just from the outside. So thank Eric Stevens, wherever he's at.
Right. Pastor?
Well, I just want to say I really commend the board, David and your staff, for really being so proactive and really helping all the victims here that have really suffered a horrific event in their lives. Losing a home, losing their belongings, not knowing where to stay. I'm sure it's a very traumatic experience for each of them. And like you say, Nancy, our hearts and prayers go out to them, because it's really a horrific situation for them, and any helping hand they can have at this time is really, really appreciated, I'm sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So we will start with our first agenda item, and that is staff recognition. Okay. I would like to recognize Cindy O'Leary from IT for her work helping the licensing division address a backlog in the processing of workers' compensation certificates. Your contributions are appreciated very much. Could I have her come up here, right? Could you please come up here, Cindy? Getting my page numbers here, sorry. So the next item, agenda item C, public comment session for items not on the agenda and future agenda item requests on page 49. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the committee cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on such item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, to allow this committee sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per an individual. Are there any individuals that wish to address the committee at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next agenda item is on page 51. Let me see, and that is license and program update. So I'll turn this item over to Laura Zuniga to present.
Thank you, Nancy. This is just a brief update since we don't have the full program update now. It'll be in the board packet next month. Just an update on our staff vacancies. Between licensing and testing, we have 6 positions that are currently vacant and being reclassed to a different level, and then 6 additional vacancies for a total of 12. And personnel is working hard on helping us fill our vacancies. Are there any questions on the staff positions or vacancies? And then our second item is...
So do any committee members have any comments on this item? Members of the public? Okay. Our second item is an update on the staff determinations regarding license and classifications and application review process. Staff will be meeting weekly to review and discuss any out-of-the-ordinary processing requests, classification questions, and license and related matters that have requested executive-level review. Requests should be directed to Laura Zuniga and Tanya Cochran. Do any committee members have any comments on this item? Do any members of the public have comment on this item? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item E, which is on page 53. Yep. Actually, it starts on page 55. This is review, discussion, and possible action regarding licensing reciprocity with other states and the use of the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies, NASCLA, trade exams and trade exam waivers. There is some material in the packet, as we stated on page 55. This item is one of the Licensing Committee's strategic objectives to review existing reciprocity agreements and how other states handle CSLB licensees. CSLB currently has limited reciprocity with 3 states, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Staff recommends expanding CSLB's existing reciprocity provisions to 6 additional states to allow a trade exam waiver of the B General Building Contractor exam to qualified applicants that hold a license from the state that use the NASCLA General Building Contractor exam, and to determine if those states would treat California licensees in the same manner. The 9 states would include Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Nevada, North Carolina, Oregon, and Utah. I will now turn it over for presentation by Tracy Montez from the Department of Consumer Affairs, Chief Division of Programs and Policy Review, and Heidi Linser, Chief of the Office of Professional Exam Services, who will provide a presentation on the use of the NASCLA trade exams and trade exam waivers.
It's a short presentation. You can stay. Good morning. I'm Heidi Linser. I'm the Chief of the Office of Professional Examination Services, and I have Tracy Montez here, who's the Chief of the Division of Programs and Policy Review, who our OPES is under. So just to give you a little bit of background on who I am, I started my career at OPES, DCA's was then called the Office of Examination Resources. So I was there from 1995 to 1999, and then I was here at CSLB for 14 years, from 1999 to 2013. So I know a lot of you here, and some of you board members, most of you board members, that you remember me. So I came over to CSLB. I was the supervisor of the Test Validation and Development Unit, and then I was promoted to a management position. And when our division manager, Bob Porter, might all remember, left in 2011, his position was eliminated, and I took over as the testing division manager. And during that time, I also worked I did a lot of committee work with NASCLA. And in 2000, I was asked to participate in the NASCLA Accredited Examination Committee that was working on developing standards for accredited examination providers. We were trying to improve the standards for contractors' licensing exams because there were a lot of issues at that time with exam subversion and a lot of providers not meeting good quality testing standards. So there was a long-standing NASCLA committee developed to try to develop standards that all licensing examinations should meet. So I worked for a long time on that committee, and we produced these standards. And during the course of that time, we decided to work toward development of a somewhat national examination, knowing that it wouldn't be national in the sense that all states would use it, but there were a lot of states very much interested in reciprocity. A lot of states in NASCLA already had reciprocity agreements, but we wanted to have a very well-developed examination that states could share. So I worked on that until 2011, and then in 2013, I took a promotional position over at DCA to the Office of Professional Examination Services, where I am now. So just to give you a little background on OPES and what we do, because you have your own internal testing division, your board doesn't work a lot directly with OPES, but we do provide consulting services to all the boards and bureaus, including yours. So we provide professional examination, development, validation, and consulting services to all the boards, bureaus, and committees within DCA. And we also maintain an independent and objective perspective on the development of licensure examinations. We provide administrative support. We develop and maintain departmental policies related to licensure examination, development, and validation, subject matter expert participation, and examination security. We review external contracts for examination-related services. We compile data for the Business and Professions Code Section 139 report. And if you're not familiar with that section, that is a requirement that all boards and bureaus conduct occupational analyses for all their examinations every 5 to 7 years, and that boards review their prerequisites for sitting for examinations on a regular basis. So OPES compiles all that information from all the boards and bureaus, and we oversee all the boards and bureaus' licensing examination projects as best we can. We do a lot of them ourselves, as I'm going to show you, but we also try to have oversight to make sure that boards are in compliance with 139 and testing standards and guidelines. We also manage the computer-based testing master services agreement that most of the boards and bureaus use to administer their examinations. And another part of our work is consulting, which is why we're here today. We provide psychometric expertise for boards when they have examination-related questions. We do special analyses regarding examination issues, and we also do the exam and administration for a lot of boards, and a security analysis. So services, some of our services are pro rata. The consulting is pro rata. Other services we do via intra-agency contracts. We conduct occupational analysis. We do exam development. We do criterion reference passing score. We also review, a lot of the boards and bureaus have national examinations. We do evaluations of those examinations to make sure they meet testing standards and guidelines, and we do to make sure they meet security requirements. We do exam-related special projects, and we do subject matter expert recruitment for some of the boards and bureaus who don't have staff to do that. But you're lucky here, you have your own in-house testing division that's been developed for, and it's been groomed and improved for many, many years, and so it's a very well-oiled machine. This is the list of OPS clients, boards, bureaus, committees. So for today, I'm here in a consulting capacity to just give you some expertise, given that I was here for a long time and my background with NASCLA. Reciprocity is always a big issue with NASCLA, and I know CSLB has a long history of participating in NASCLA. And so reciprocity has always been a difficult issue in that CSLB is, for one thing, has its own building codes in California, so that's always been an issue. But anyway, goals of reciprocity: removing barriers to licensure, and that's a big topic now, as I'm sure you all know, enhancing mobility for licensees, and reducing redundant licensing requirements, and that's always been a big topic at NASCLA. NASCLA was started by a lot of the southern states, and they're smaller and they're closer together, and they have much more of a need to move from state to state, especially commercial building contractors, because they may be building a big, supermarket complex, and they may not have any other work, and they have to go to other states to get more work. So it grew out of that, and California was a lot of times, well, it doesn't always apply to us, we're far away from them, but given the current climate, it's now a goal for, I think, all of us to try to work together and move toward common ground. Gives us an opportunity to move toward consistent licensure standards, and with the Little Hoover Commission, attacking licensure in some way, it behooves us to look into this as an opportunity now to work together with other states. When I first started with NASCLA, we had a big book of all the scopes of practice for general building contractor, and it was, they were all so different, and we started looking at them, we're like, how can we make any sense of these? They were all very, very different, and it just seems interesting that every state had a little different twist on what a contractor should do, and it's the same, a lot across other professions as well, but I did also work on a national occupational analysis for commercial general building contractors. And you could see that there were commonalities once you start doing a big project like that, where we looked at the actual scope of practice of what they actually did on the job. We did find that there are commonalities, and you can look towards national standards. And of course, the pressure to allow for acceptance of national examinations. So as far as the challenge of reciprocity, the issue is always, my recommendation is that the board should evaluate the differences in the scope of practice. What you're looking at with the NASCLA commercial building examination, first of all, it's a commercial building contractor. The CSLB scope of practice is for, CSLB doesn't make a distinction between commercial and a residential contractor. However, the exam is geared toward residential contracting, and if you look at the study guide, and you can see that it's different, that CSLB is more geared toward residential, and the NASCLA is geared toward commercials. So I think the board needs to evaluate these differences. There's differences in the examination content, there's differences in the format. The NASCLA exam is an open book exam. The CSLB is a closed book exam. The passing scores different, passing rates a little different. I think you have that information in your packet. I think that the committee needs to assess So in general, we need to assess psychometric standards, and I'm here to tell you, normally we would say we would need to do a review, a psychometric review of an exam that you were considering accepting. However, I was so much involved in the NASCLA exam, I can tell you that it was developed in accordance with psychometric standards, and it's a very, very well-developed exam and maintained. And I'm still in touch with the people who do maintain it, so I can tell you that it does meet psychometric standards. You need to assess state-specific knowledge. Of course, a national exam is not going to cover state-specific requirements that CSLB has. And any risks, any enforcement risks, CSLB already has a waiver policy, and you should look to see if there are any additional enforcement actions against people who were licensed through the waiver process who didn't take our state-based exam, or our state exam. They all have to take the law and business exam, of course. So, should the committee decide that it wants to move forward with reciprocity with NASCLA, OPS has the following recommendations that you should accept after reviewing. I mean, I really encourage you to do a thorough discussion and review of the differences and see if you're comfortable with that, but accept that the examinations are not going to be parallel. And a lot of literature says, well, you should review for reciprocity and see that the examinations are parallel. They're not parallel, so you're going to just have to accept that it's not the same examination. That it should maintain its existing waiver regulations, in that a contractor needs to be licensed in good standing in another state for 5 years, and they would need to take the law and business examination, so you already have those regulations in place. Except that you should accept, if you do decide to accept it for only for reciprocity. I wouldn't recommend accepting it for new applicants who haven't already made an application and aren't practicing in another state. And any other, and we wouldn't want to open the floodgates for other states to say, oh, now California is open to reciprocity, because we haven't ever been very much open to reciprocity. So any other state that has their own state-based exam, we wouldn't just want you to accept those as well. We're just talking about this NASCLA examination. So any other examinations proposed for reciprocity would need to be evaluated. And also recommend that the CSLB should participate in the NASCLA occupational analysis process. That way our voice would be heard, and any California-specific things may be addressed. And of course, you know that earthquakes, seismic safety, and those things aren't going to be on a national exam, because other states don't have to know that information. So those are things that you need to consider. Is there any questions at this point?
Thank you for your presentation. It was pretty thorough. Did you do a cost-benefit analysis on this? What the impacts of this would be on our revenue or benefit to the state to have this partnership with NASCLA? And the reason is that some of the recommendations that you made and some of the issues that you addressed, particularly seismic knowledge and also fire now, for that matter, are very unique to California. And I just wanted to know what other analysis you think that we may need to do for us to really make a recommendation on this opportunity.
I haven't done anything about cost. My guess is that with regard to reciprocity, you're not going to have a huge number of applicants who want to qualify this way. That's my guess, that it would be a very small percentage who would come in through using the NASCLA exam, but I may be mistaken on that. So I also want to be careful. Those states that the states you're considering, those are all states that accept the NASCLA exam, correct? Is that right, David? And that would only be for the building contractor, not for their other exams. Okay. Okay. So I don't know about the cost impact. I don't know how many people would be wanting to apply to CSLB using this process.
I'm just wondering, I'm trying to think, and maybe Johnny, you can help me here. How this benefits contractors or how it benefits consumers. For example, if we have reciprocity with some of these other states, would we be maybe flooded with new persons wanting to come in to compete with our current base of contractors, for example, electricians? I think the recommendation here just calls for general B contractors. But I was thinking, we don't know what that impact may be. For consumers, it might be good because you have more competition as to select. But the other issue is, how can we see is there any way to check to see what their professional background is as far as their work product, if they're coming from one of the other states here that are listed here as reciprocity? So I had those concerns.
Sure, and I have those same concerns, and some of the states that are mentioned here, in my humble opinion, can barely govern themselves. I can't see California contractors going into some of these states. As was stated, they don't have a lot of work there to begin with. What I see is a lot of these contractors in some of these states flooding towards California as their work dries up, and a lot of these are right-to-work states. They don't have prevailing wage laws. They've got different safety laws. They've got all these different things. And as a official from the IBEW, I spent a lot of time in enforcement trying to make sure that people paid. And frankly, the worst contractor to get that cheated his employees is one from another state. Try to get them to pay, they just leave.
Yeah.
So I've got the same issues that you've got. I would, really want to hear from our contractors associations.
Yeah.
I can't see them coming in and bidding on an equal playing field with our current contractors in California. I would have to be convinced, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Tracy Montez with DCA, and I just wanted to, clarify a couple of things. OPS just looks at psychometric aspects. We don't necessarily look at cost-benefit analysis, so that's why we don't have that particular data for you. But of course, it is of interest in your considerations. And one of the things that we're trying to do with the boards and bureaus is to try and find creative ways to help with reciprocity, because there is such a push on looking at licensing requirements by the Little Hoover Commission as well as other entities, and there seems to be such a need for individuals, more professionals in the various fields. And so although there are some content, differences on the exams, your waiver does provide that the individuals applying for licensure must still take the business and law exam, as well as being licensed in good standing for 5 years in another state. So not just anybody can apply for reciprocity. And one of the reasons why we were relaxing a bit on the content of the exam is it's been my understanding that a lot of the work does come down to knowing the different codes. So if you are a contractor in another state in good standing, you know that you have to look at the codes in the jurisdiction in which you're building, and that you can then generalize that knowledge, that process for California as well. So just some things to think about, because you do have a very nice reciprocity waiver process in place, and that does help protect you as well as the other professionals who are licensed. So again, I just wanted to remind you of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to refocus the discussion back on the reciprocity aspect of the requirements, 7065.4 has a two-part analysis. The first, which you have in your packet, are that the professional qualifications and conditions of good standing for licensure and continued licensure are at least the same or greater. And I think what OPES is trying to do is to give you information about whether you might want to consider in determining whether those qualifications are the same or greater when you're comparing the two states, or the states you're comparing to California. The second part is that the state that you would be considering has to accept the qualifications of a contractor licensed in this state for a purpose of licensure in the other state. So reciprocity necessarily takes into consideration that their state would recognize the qualifications of our licensees in their state for purposes of licensure. So it's not just that their requirements are the same or greater, but that they would accept those qualifications for licensure from California in that other state. So the analysis needs to include both aspects to be considered something in terms of going forward with reciprocity agreements. And I think that some of the things that OPES discussed about considering if you moved in that direction should be considered part of the agreements going forward. Some of those aspects that she mentioned should be in the reciprocity agreements, if that's a direction you were considering.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you both, Heidi and Tracy, for that presentation. So do we have any committee members have any other comments on this item?
I would just further my comments. I really don't see the benefit to California by these types of reciprocity. I can see like states that Oregon, Washington, states that have similar laws to our own in California. California sort of leads the way. Some of these, without casting aspersion on other states, I'm California, and I'm here to protect California's California law. I don't see bringing folks in that are going to compete with us in a manner that is going to bring our own style of living down, in my opinion.
Thanks, Johnny.
I was just going to add that the reason we included this on the agenda and why staff have been looking at it is to implement one of the board's strategic objectives. So it was discussed at our last strategic planning meeting. It's a response to, as OPS talked about, in response to a Little Hoover Commission report that was really focused on reducing barriers to occupational licensing. And so this was one of the recommendations, is to look at how states and licensing agencies can make it easier for licensees to cross state lines and make the process more open.
Okay. Pastor?
Yeah, I know where you were going with this because of the recommendation, but for me personally, I really would like to see more of a cost-benefit analysis as to what benefit it would have for not only consumers but for contractors. And I think Board Member Simpson presented a good issue. I don't see a lot of our contractors moving or wanting to go to some of these states, not unless there's a natural disaster there where there might be work for them. But I'm just not comfortable with it, because California is the leading edge in many aspects, and I think in our regulations and our resources available to consumers to know about the quality of work of an individual contractor is over and above many states. And my concern would be if I were a consumer and I would maybe want to contract with someone from Alabama or I don't know where, North Carolina, how do I know what their quality of work is? I don't know if they have information concerning their work, their licensing information, or their complaint history. It would be even more difficult to have some greater background information on the professional abilities. So I'm a little concerned. If the board in general decides to move forward with this, I would rather do it with one state and one classification
but not a B license, because that's a pretty big area, to do it. So that's where I'm coming.
Thank you. Chris?
So just a suggestion carrying over from Mr. Herrera's comments. If you look at page 57, there's an analysis from staff on the experience requirements by state in comparison to California. So perhaps you could ask staff to bring back information on the states they're recommending and give a more detailed breakdown as to why, for instance, they would say that the experience requirements are equivalent to the California requirements. So you could see more detail as to how they came to that conclusion, because one of the prongs for the reciprocity analysis is that they have the same or greater qualifications for licensure than California. So maybe get more factual detail on that so you could feel a little more comfortable with the staff's recommendation. If you have concerns about the exam types, because it looks like they're all open book versus California's closed. So things like that, like more detail about how staff came to these conclusions, perhaps, that would help inform the discussion, because reciprocity should stick to the 765.4 statutory requirements, because those are the requirements you have for allowing reciprocity. Number one, that their qualifications for licensure are the same or greater, and number two, that they would accept California's qualifications in that state. So that would just be a suggestion, perhaps, to continue with the board's strategic plan of exploring expansion of reciprocity, is maybe perhaps have more on those states the staff's recommending, provide more detail about how they came to those conclusions. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good step forward. I mean, I am concerned also about the open book exam. I mean, I just, as a person in the education field right now, I just don't know about that. And the other thing I think adding to that is, why did we select the classification of the B license? That was, and you could, forward, I mean, later on, you could probably provide us information on that.
Thank you.
So we selected the NASCLA, the B Commercial General Building Exam, because that's the one that's available and it's ready, and other states are using it. So NASCLA is in the process of developing the electrical exam. That's not ready and not in use yet, so we can't look at that. But the B is more wide use and something we could look at using.
And to include the staff work that we'll go back and do, we can look at our enforcement statistics for those states that we currently have reciprocity agreements with and bring that to the committee.
Thank you. So we still, David?
Yeah, I'm looking at the CSLB and NASCLA contractor license exams, and there is a difference between, on the code referenced, California building codes and international building codes are quite a bit different. I know that because I sit on the technical committee. So, and especially on the seismic side, but also just regular on the building codes, because California has Title 24, which is a huge difference. So just information.
Thank you. We still have to go out to public comment, and then we'll address whether we're going to go motion or ask for additional information. So at this moment, seeing no more comments from the board, public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. Our next step would be that we're going to recommend that to possibly make a motion to staff's recommendation, or as we're hearing on the table, that it looks like we may not want to do that at this moment and may want to ask for additional information. So, committee, is that what we're asking for at this point? Johnny?
I'm not prepared to ask to go forward on it. I would rather get more information. I would really like to hear what our contractors associations in the state has to say about it. I'd like to maybe hear something on safety laws and that sort of stuff. I really don't see what California gets out of a partnership with Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana. Our contractors are not moving south. They would be moving here, in just my opinion. So I'm really not sure, I'm not comfortable moving forward to make a recommendation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So at this point, it looks like that what we're going to do is ask for, oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
I apologize, Richard Markison. I haven't received any guidance from my clients on this issue as well, and to Mr. Simpson's point, I think that would be helpful to hear from the contracting community, but I would point out that as a consumer protection agency, your primary responsibility is to protect the public, not erect barriers to prohibit or reduce competition. I think in general, most of my members are licensed in multiple states and believe that competition can be a good thing. But again, with the caveat that your primary responsibility is to protect the public, and certainly to Mr. Herrera's point, whether a homeowner is going to be comfortable contracting with an Alabama general contractor, would pose some questions, I think, in the minds of most consumers. I would say, however, that from talking to both the specialty and the general contractors who are located in the North Coast area, right now with the prospect of repairs and new construction to 8,000 or 9,000 structures that you're certainly dealing with, I think the B contractors and even the subcontractors are going to be under considerable stress in the next 18 to 24 months to deal with the influx of that work. And if this had been in place prior to that, to the fires, the industry might have been able to react a little bit more quickly than it is anticipated that we will now. That said, again, I do want to stress that protecting the public, and particularly in the period of time after a natural disaster like you've had, should be paramount.
thank you, sir. So at this point, I think what I'm hearing, so let me clarify, is that we are not moving forward with any kind of motion. We would request that staff would bring back additional information as well as reach out to contractor exchange stakeholders to get feedback. Did I miss anything?
Madam Chair, I so move.
I don't know that, I don't think we need a motion, but we'll move forward with that.
Well, you had to want to recommend it. Okay.
Right? Oh, okay.
Okay.
We're
It's
good.
up to you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, so that's what we'll do. So staff, make note of that, please. All right, so next agenda item would be agenda item F, that is located on page 73. And that would be review, discussion, and possible action regarding the distribution of funds from the Construction Management Education Account, CMEA. Actually starts on page 75. CSLB collects a voluntary contribution from applicants and licensees to fund the CMEA, which is intended to provide grants to prepare graduates to fill positions in construction management. CSLB last issued grants in fiscal year 2013-14. Staff recommends waiting until fiscal year 2018-19 to begin dispersing grant awards to qualified institutions so that the CMEA fund has time to establish a healthy reserve, and that the board begin the process of appointing a new advisory committee and authorize staff to begin the recruitment process. Do we have any, does the committee members have any comments on this item?
I just have a question. What is this money, how is the money used at the educational institutions? Are it scholarships, or is it training for individual students? I mean, do you just give the money to the institution and then what happens?
I think they can use it how they wish, either for scholarships or for training. I'm not sure on the particulars, but find some more information for you on maybe the last time the money was awarded and how a few sample ones awarded the money.
And the other thing is that I'm not sure about this, do community colleges also have these construction management certificates or something? I wasn't sure.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Because I thought if they did, and the reason I asked the question is it appears now that the community colleges are really trying to prepare people for job-ready opportunities in the workplace, And since, this is construction, of course, is such a important area for California, and there's less and less skilled professionals in many of the fields that, that we license, I'm not sure if they actually are, the community colleges are getting into that field of construction management. Is there any way we could find out, or, I don't know, maybe.
Consumers River College is a local college here. Any other committee members have comment? Seeing none, does anyone in the public have a comment on this item? All right, hearing and seeing none there. So there is a staff recommendation on this to wait till the 2018-19 fiscal year. I would need a motion to adopt that staff recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Can I ask for a friendly amendment? One of the items the staff requested was that you allow them to begin the recruitment process for appointing a new advisory committee.
Oh, that's right.
So if you could add that to your motion.
Yeah, let's have Laura read that full motion so that, Pastor, you could agree to that, or whoever made the motion.
So the recommendation is to wait until fiscal year 2018-19 to begin dispersing grant awards to qualified institutions so that CMA fund has time to establish a healthy reserve, and that the board begin the process of appointing a new advisory committee and authorize staff to begin the recruitment process.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's okay with that?
I agree with that.
Great. So Laura, roll call?
Dave Diaz? Yes. Pastor Herrera?
Yes.
Ed Lang?
Yes.
Johnny Simpson?
Aye.
Nancy Springer?
Aye. Do you need to do public comment again? No, good. Okay. So the next agenda item is agenda item G, and that is a review and discussion regarding minimum qualification requirements for a B general building contractor license. And this is on page 81. This information in the packet begins on page 81 on the B license experience requirements. CSLB currently requires applicants for B general building contractor license to demonstrate 4 years of journey-level, hands-on framing experience, in addition to experience in 2 other trades performed in connection with the fixed work. Many applicants for a B general building contractor license include those who perform residential remodel and work, have experience in multiple trades related to residential construction, such as home remodeling, but do not have the hands-on framing experience. Various stakeholders have approached the board regarding CSLB's current requirement for applicants for B general building contractor license to demonstrate 4 years of journey level, hands-on framing experience, in addition to experience in 2 other trades performed in connection with the fixed work. In October, CSLB staff held a meeting with some members of the industry to discuss current industry practices and gauge feedback. Industry representatives agreed that in new construction and commercial work, some B contractors self-perform framing, while others subcontract the work out. CSLB staff have also confirmed that no other western states, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah, require hands-on framing experience to obtain a B general building contractor license. Staff has made a recommendation that CSLB request that the Department of Consumer Affairs legal counsel review the current statutory and regulatory requirements of the general B license requirements. At this point, does the committee members have any comments on this item?
This is a question for council. I mean, based on the recommendation, do you know what we're asking for you to do?
I know. I think I need a little bit more information from staff to find out the backstory, because I don't have any background on this issue. I also don't know what our office's recommendations have been in the past, so I'm going to need probably more information as to what exactly the staff have been doing and what the historical position of the board has been, and reviewing the statute and the legislative history. Like I said, I'm coming in late to the game here, so probably going to need some additional information from staff to help address this.
Yeah, well, as I read the recommendation, I just didn't know if, council would know what we're asking for you to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need to do that in the recommendation, Laura, or should we be more specific?
I think Registrar David here will
Okay,
give us a
great.
comment.
Well, Laura Zuniga and I will meet next week, and we're going to put together all of the material that we have. We're going to forward it to you, Christie, so you have everything to review. Okay.
Any additional comments from the board? Does the public have any comments on this item? Turn on your mic, please.
Sure. Bruce Rudman from Abdulaziz Gross Barton Rudman. I've spent 21 years doing nothing but practicing licensing law. I can tell you that this is a perverse twist of the law to suggest that you have to be a framer to get a B license. Even your own examination, which is on page 61, is a balanced examination of multiple trades. The Home Depot decision in 1976 chastised the board for interpreting a regulation different than the law. And the board went back to the legislature and modified section 7057. 7057 requires a contractor to either do framing or 2 or more trades, not counting framing. And there are about 50, 55 classifications that a B contractor can perform, and they can perform every single one of them other than water well drilling and fire sprinklers. So the B contractor's qualifications to get a license should be 4 years of experience of multiple trades combined, 8,000 hours of combined experience in any of those trades. It could be 4 years of framing, or it could be, I do a little plumbing, I do a little electrical, I'm a remodeler. There's nothing in the law that defines a B contractor as a remodeling contractor. There's nothing in the law that defines them as a commercial contractor. A B contractor is a person who builds a structure. It has to be a structure. That's the only real limitation in a B contractor. It's 2 or more trades, not counting framing. If someone wants to do only framing, they get a C5. And according to your report, it looks like 1% of your people. You have 102,000 B contractors and 811 C5 contractors. So we're not talking about a lot of people who only want to do framing. Now, if you wanted to have a remodeling classification, that's a different classification that you don't have. So right now, if someone applies for a license and they have 4 years of experience doing multiple trades, and they meet your qualifications and they pass your exam, it doesn't matter that they don't do new construction. And I've heard that there's some technicians who've, maybe at first blush, said, well, you don't have the qualifications if you don't have 4 years experience in new construction. I'll tell you that 90% of the construction in California is not new construction. But let me ask you this. You have 8,000 houses that just burned down in Santa Rosa. Are those going to be done on, that's not new construction. So can a B contractor do that work? Because an A can't. I'm all for the law having a uniform set of rules, and sometimes new staff think that it should be a little differently, but there's regulations, and you have a regulation. It hasn't been changed since 1984. Regulation 825 talks about the, okay, because now I'm shifting gears. I'm talking about the type of experience, because it's not only the guy has hands-on experience. You have to have 4 years experience, except for you don't have to have 4 years experience if you have a degree, or if you're an architect or an engineer. It could be as little as 1 year experience. But it's not just experience in the trenches. It doesn't have to be a journeyman carpenter. It can be the guy who supervises the journeyman carpenter, or it can be the guy that supervises the plumber or the electrician. That qualifies under your own regulation. So you can't now have an inside policy that's different than your regulation without changing your regulation. And that's section 825. So, you
I'll
know,
need you to wrap up, but you're past your 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, okay, sorry.
But you can wrap up, just wrap it
Oh,
up.
okay. So just wrapping up, you know, and I had a conversation, David and I gave a presentation yesterday in Southern California, and we talked about some of these issues. And it probably merits a discussion, a serious discussion with industry, but you can't just limit a B contractor to only new construction or only people who have 4 years of experience in framing, because you won't have any B contractors. And the whole purpose of the law is to get people licensed. You want people to be licensed so you can regulate them, and you won't get a pool of people that, you know, all you'll get are C5 contractors if you limit it to 4 years of framing 4 years of framing experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can you just clarify that the B license doesn't limit it to just new construction?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have any other comments from the public on this item? Okay. Board Member Diaz?
Yeah, and there's one thing I know is, being in construction for as long as I have been, there's a lot of B licenses out there that don't do anything except sub every aspect of the job out. So I would agree that you probably wouldn't need to know, or 4 years of framing to sub everything out. They're basically a construction management person, not a contract, but they're a contractor, but they just do the management. They don't actually build anything. And so I get that, yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your comment, sir. Thank you, Board Member. So at this point, we have staff recommendation, and that is to request in DCA legal counsel to review the current statutory regulatory requirements of the general B license. Do we have a motion to move forward with that?
I make the motion as long as there's no friendly amendments. Okay, good.
Second.
So, do we have any commitments, comments on that?
Do we have to indicate that staff will be providing you with information in the next couple of weeks, or is that
I
necessary?
think that's understood, and then this will go to the full board for the board to vote
That's
on.
true. That's true.
So, because if it's a
a
board
recommendation.
opinion, then it needs
Yeah.
to be approved
Okay,
by the board.
perfect.
And again, any members of the public have comment on the motion? Okay, seeing none. I need Laura, take the vote.
David Diaz?
Yes.
Pastor Herrera?
Yes.
Ed Lang?
Yes.
Johnny Simpson?
Yes.
Nancy Springer?
Yes. And as council advised, this will be going to the board. We are now on agenda item H, which is on page 85. This is to review and discussion of the process and of original exam applications. I'll turn this over to Laura.
Thank you, Nancy. So since we didn't have a traditional program update, we focused on one of the units in licensing. So this is application examination unit. This is where, for original applications that require an exam that don't have a waiver. So as Nancy said, there's information beginning on page 85 that kind of describes the work of the unit. I did want to talk about the staffing. They have 10 full-time technicians and 1 full-time supervisor to process the work. They have 1 current vacancy. We have been borrowing staff from other units and licensing to assist to the extent possible in processing the workload. And then we also have plans to hire 5 limited-term positions to assist with addressing the backlog. Right now, we're processing applications that were received between 5 to 6 weeks ago. As you can see on the chart on applications received, that the number of applications coming in has gone up. It was up 10% in fiscal year 16-17. And then at the bottom of page 85, going on to the next page, there's information about applications that are returned for corrections. This is one of the main reasons that can take quite a bit of time to complete processing of an original exam application. In 16-17, 57% of the applications received were returned for correction, and then they're often returned multiple times for correction. So there's time to go back and forth with the applicant to make the required corrections so that we can post the application, and then the applicant can go forward to the exam. So we have information here as to the reasons applications can be returned for correction, so it certainly varies. And then the technicians have 5 days to review corrections and return applications. We did recently make available an online application that can be filled out online that we had hoped would reduce the error rate, but we haven't seen that yet. So we'll look at working with our IT division and revising the application to make it more user-friendly and potentially make it more of a smart form to make it more difficult to submit it with incomplete or inaccurate information. And then beneath that, we have information on the applications posted. You can see that stays pretty consistent. So once it's accepted in the application, we verify the information on the application, the applicant go forward to testing. And as you can see in 16-17, 73% of the applications resulted in the license being issued. And then at the bottom of page 87, going on page 88, we have information about the time it takes to process these applications. And so far in 17-18, we're at 5.2 weeks. I do want to mention that data prior to 2016 may not be as accurate as the data we have now, as we change the way we assign work to more closely track all the pending applications. And then at the bottom is a chart we started providing at the last board meeting that more fully details the time to process the application and how long the full process is.
Thank you, Laura. Do any of the committee members have comments on this item?
I thought it was very interesting. How do you track these? Do you have like a scan coder on each application so you can tell them, when they go from one step to another? Or is this all done by paper? I mean, it seems like an overwhelming process.
It's a lot of paper. Everything is imaged, so all documents are scanned. And so for pending applications, they're tracked by what's called the application fee number that's assigned to each applicant. So when you go into the imaging system, you pull up, if you enter the application fee number, you'll see all the related documents. And so some of them have 20, 30 documents associated with them, because they might need to submit different work experience, they need to correct the name they've listed on the application, so there's a lot of correspondence going back and forth.
Now, when do they go to Secretary of State? Do they go after the application is approved or after the exam, they take the exam?
You mean to verify the corporation? So the staff will check that when they're reviewing the application. So if the information on Secretary of State doesn't match what's listed on the application, it needs to be corrected.
That was one of the reasons where the log cam is. Has that improved? I remember a couple of years ago, it was just a mess there. Now is it better or worse?
It has gotten somewhat better. Yeah, I think we've tried to educate applicants to this. It's a big problem with the LLC applications, but as well as any of the corporations. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want us to do as a board here, or just provide us with information, or do you want to set a goal as to what did you want to maybe revise the goal as to maybe instead of making 5 weeks, make it 2 weeks, or how we might be able to help in reducing
It's really
it?
just informational. Certainly our goal isn't to be at 5 weeks. We consider 2 weeks for all of our units to be ideal. So clearly it'll take some work to get there. So we have support from the executive staff and the limited term positions. And then we've talked, the manager and supervisor and I met yesterday to talk about different improvements we can make. So there are some things we feel like we can do. A lot of it is going to depend. To really reduce the time significantly, we think it's going to require some IT help in terms of the application and just starting over with that. The application is between 4 to 6 pages with the work experience, but I think the first 9 pages of it are, it's just information, and it's not, it's probably overwhelming for the applicant to try to get through those 9 pages to understand where they're supposed to start on the application. So make it easier to comprehend.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, hearing and seeing none. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item I. That's on page 91. This item is review, discussion, and possible action on development publications to address common licensing questions. CSLB receives numerous inquiries on our classifications. There are a few samples of those type of questions on page 91. As you can see from the samples, the responses are based on CSLB statute and regulations, sorry. These are also examples of questions we receive frequently. Staff is looking at posting some of the more common questions and responses online to make the information more publicly available. Do we have any, do any committee members have comments on this item? I would just like,
I just thought that maybe as an initial step, because I know getting a publication out is work intensive, is maybe posting some of these questions on a industry bulletin. You know, maybe you get 4 or 5 in a month that you think is interesting. Just make an industry bulletin out and send it out, you know, to all the contractors on the list, on the listserv, so you can get the word out. Like, you know, I don't know, the last couple of months, these are the top questions that were asked or we got, and here's the answer for those of you that might be concerned, because I know it's very labor intensive to get a publication out.
Right, I think that's a good suggestion. We'll look at that. Thank you.
thank you. And I would like to add that, and I believe you already taken this into consideration and may have discussed in regards to the disasters of clarifying license requirements in regards to removing debris and hazardous waste and what B contractors can do, and just like maybe an informative flyer that can be available in the LACs for the
I
survivors.
think maybe Public Affairs put something together like that. I'll verify, and then if not, we'll certainly get the information out. That's a good suggestion.
It takes some partnership with the public affairs people. I don't want to give them work, but, you know, be a nice partnership. Be a feather in your cap.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments on this item from the public? Richard?
Good afternoon. Council can probably guide you on this, but I have a little base concern that FAQs or similar interpretation of law or regulations could potentially be caught under the Administrative Procedures Act as a regulatory process, but I'm sure that Ms. Sledge would be able to explain.
He's talking about underground regulations, and so we just, as staff have indicated, that, for instance, this FAQ is based solely on what's currently in statute or regulation. So, yes, that is part of the process that legal does for the boards in the department. Thank you.
Bruce?
Just add one thing. You know, some of these questions, and I agree with the answers that are here, come up in legal disputes all the time. Like, how much incidental and supplemental work can you do before it's no longer incidental and supplemental? And some people have a 5% or a 10% idea in their head, and there's no definition. No one knows, you know. And I just worry a little bit that someone reads this and thinks, oh, okay, so now I'm doing an air conditioner, I put a new panel in the house because they need an electrical system to support the air conditioner, something like that. And while I think they can do the 3-foot whip to the condensing unit outside, I'm not sure they could put a whole new panel in and call it incidental and supplemental. It's just something to think about, that's all.
Thank you both for your comments. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing here and none. We'll now move on to agenda item J. Discussion of applicant and industry outreach regarding licensure. I'll turn this over to Registrar Dave Fode.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. I would just like to publicly recognize 2 of our staff that are with us today. We have Anna Rodriguez in the audience, put your hand up, and Claire Goldstein in the back. And they've been instrumental in putting together an applicant workshop. Our first workshop will be in this room here on November the 17th. And we're looking to get the word out through our industry partners, and one being the North Coast Builders Exchange. They have a real concern about enough contractors being available for the rebuild efforts. So we're working with them. We're working with the California Landscape Contractors Association and other industry partners to identify individuals that would qualify for a license, but maybe need some information on the benefits of becoming licensed and just some general information on how to fill out the application and the process. We have a third staff member, Kayla Bosley, that's not with us today, to be part of this. And on December 15th, we'll have a similar workshop in our Norwalk office. So we're real excited about it, and perhaps Pastor can be present for that. That would be wonderful.
If I can, I'll be more than happy.
Okay, and as was mentioned earlier, classification issues are very complicated. We are looking at some of the administrative decisions that we make, and staff have to make these decisions on a daily basis. I'm 100% convinced that they're making these decisions based upon protection of the public and consumers. I really want to thank them for that. Since I have taken on a new role, I've realized just how complicated the licensing issues can be. And we need to do what we can, though, to work with our stakeholders, our industry partners, consumer groups, and others to make sure that we're making decisions that are based upon public protection, looking at our regulations and seeing if they do make sense, if they are overburdensome, if they need to be evaluated. I know Laura is working very closely on addressing those issues. And I really want to thank Laura Zuniga for her work. What we're looking to do is the first of next year, perhaps January or February, having an industry meeting here in this room where we can further discuss any outstanding issues there may be, and if there's an opportunity to publicly put out what the requirements are, say, for the B license, if that's ultimately decided, as an example. So that would conclude this agenda item.
Thank you, David. Do you have any comments from the board? I mean, from the committee members? Sorry about that. Seeing none. Do we have any comments on this item from the public? Okay, here and seeing none, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, and that agenda item is Agenda Item K, 2016 through 18 Strategic Plan Update, discussion and possible action on the 2017-18 licensing and examination objectives. Turn this over to Laura.
Thank you, Nancy. So the chart is on page 97. Staff is suggesting modifying a few of the dates. So for item 1.1, to change the target date from March 2017 to June 2018. For item 1.3, because of the discussion today, moving the target date from September 2017 to June 2018. And for item 1.4, from December 2017 to March 2018.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any committee members have a comment on this item? Any members of the public have comment on this item? Seeing none there, I need a motion from the committee members.
Second.
So we got a first and second, we got a motion, we got a second, so Laura, can you do roll?
Dave Diaz?
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oops, I apologize. So do we have any comments from committee members on the motion? Any comments from the public on the motion? All right. Roll call.
David Diaz?
Yes.
Pastor Herrera?
Yes.
Ed Lang?
Yes.
Johnny Simpson?
Yes.
Nancy Springer?
Yes. This concludes our licensing committee meeting, so I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Any comments from committee members? Any comments from the public? Can we have roll call?
Dave Diaz?
Yes.
Pastor Herrera?
Yes.
Ed Lang?
Yes.
Johnny Simpson? Yes. Nancy Springer?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.